Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Barnes Film Festival. I'm Charlotte McLeod and
I'm George Mackay.
and we're very pleased to see you here. Although that is the weird thing, is that we can't see you. We hope you're here. And this is the third year that you and I have spoken at the Barnes Film Festival. And the first year we were in the same cinema, this gorgeous cinema at the Olympic Cinema in Barnes. But we had an audience. It was a sold out event and it was seen by that audience and no one else. And now we're in a cinema and we're speaking into a camera, hoping there's an audience there, and hoping that it will reach a wider audience than it did before. And I guess that's what's so strange about these times, is that there is this duality between you're less physically connected, but you may be reaching a wider audience.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be interesting to discuss how you found what's happened in the last year impacting on your own work and your own working process. So I know that you were just about to start Wolf, is that right? So Wolf, would tell a little bit about Wolf.
So Wolf is a film written and directed by Natalie Biancheri. It's and it's the story of a young man named Jacob who feels that he is a wolf in a man's body. And so the process of that, Natalie always wanted to do a 4-week rehearsal process where you'd have a week of just myself, Natalie, and a brilliant movement coach called Terry Notary, to sort of suss out the kind of animalistic nature of the character, and then take 2 weeks break, and then have 3 weeks of rehearsals and workshops with the rest of the cast, all the other characters, and the film is broadly set at this facility where, which is for people who identify as animals rather than people, and the staff working there as well. And then, so I went to Dublin to work with Natalie and Terry, and sort of as we were there was the kind of the COVID situation was rising, and then just after we got home from that week, the lockdown happened basically, and so the film got pushed a number of months.
Did you think the film would actually collapse? Was there a moment where you thought it's not going to happen?
To be honest, it was all so unknown. Like, I remember being being there and sort of we were discussing, reading the news, going, wow, it's really sort of kicking off in Europe as well. And I remember we were talking about it, but it still sort of seemed distant. So I don't know if we ever thought the film would fold entirely. We just didn't know. And there's another thing to be said is our producers, Jesse and Jane, Jessie Fisk, who was incredible at doing everything she could in formulating a plan that allowed us to shoot. And so what we did is, after, I think it was about 2.5 months, we all kind of came back to do the project, but we did so by creating a bubble. There was a core group of us that was the cast, the camera crew, and the director, and the production designer, and movement coach, who bubbled in this hotel, and we didn't leave the hotel other than to go to work for the 9 weeks.
9 weeks?
So we were very well looked after. We had laundry runs done for us, and there was a certain area of the hotel that we could eat, and there was a beach out front of the hotel. It was just outside of Dublin, which was a real lifesaver. But we didn't go to a coffee shop. We didn't go shopping. We went to work, which the film also happened to all be filmed on one location, which was a mile down the road. And then we were at the hotel, and we could go on walks, but we remained in the hotel and didn't. For
9 weeks. Did you ever get a kind of stir craziness?
Well, this is the thing. I guess I was actually all right. I think I kind of really enjoyed it. And it was sort of the simplicity of everything I found really beneficial. But then by the same token, the film is also about, this young man and a number of people who feel wild and are cooped up in this facility that is trying to make them not what they are. And so any sort of feeling of kind of banging against the walls was sort of echoed in the story that we were doing. So it was kind of quite welcome. You felt, if anything, the production, or the situation was always facilitating the story.
And you had the sea. Did you have the sea?
We had the sea,
that's lovely.
and we wound up sort of having some campfires every Sunday to all be together. So there was a number of really beautiful things that came out of, you know, of having no choice but to be together. And I think it really added to the focus, and because people's willingness, we were completely, I don't know if this is even a word, but undistracted, or we weren't distracted at all. So, and we were kind of blessed with like the proximity of everyone that you're working with. So, you know, Terry, who was over for a few weeks, it was that thing of like, we've got a free hour. Can we just go? We had like one room in the hotel, like a kind of dining room that was sort of ours to kind of hang out in and rehearse in as well. And it was that thing of like, well, you're not needed on set. Can we do a movement session for an hour? And we'd workshop a scene and for an hour and a half. Or, you know, in passing, you'd see Natalie and Michal, you know, our director of photography, discussing shots, and you go and sit and talk about the aesthetic of the film. So there was a real focus that was born out of, you know, because you couldn't go, oh, there's this great new pub or restaurant that was meant to be really nice down the way. It was all about the film.
Great.
Which was actually, I find sometimes, because I like to focus, like, you know, focus when I work, and some of the time it's, the difficulty is how to sort of balance life and give space and time for reality, you know, when you're working, and to have that kind of taken off the table actually made it much clearer in how to balance kind of, you know, when you were out of your sort of headspace and when you were in your headspace, because you were kind of constantly had one foot in it by proxy of the situation.
Can I talk to you a bit about the physicality of what you had to do?
Yeah.
And the mental process, because you said that having had that extra time, you had more time to really become part of that character.
Yeah, so without giving too much away, there's moments where you see this man's kind of, well, this character's more animal nature, and that took movement in a way that I've not moved before, and that we kind of, in hindsight, went, wow, actually, to have 10 weeks rather than 2 weeks in between that initial, or more than 10 weeks, or 3 months in between the initial rehearsal week, was actually really beneficial to kind of just get fit for it. Basically, it was like training for a race. You know, the more you run, the fitter you get. It was the same thing with the animal movement, and Natalie and I also kept up a relationship. Natalie, the director, of kind of writing diaries for the character back and forth, so that we had a real, quite subconscious understanding of the character that we'd formed mutually before then even getting to the 3 weeks rehearsal that we had to then physically start playing around with the ideas that we'd come up with in those months in between.
And they were based on not just the physicality, but actually the mental process?
Yeah, this character thinks and feels the world differently. And especially to, you know, to how I feel it, and it took a wee while to kind of to find that, and it sort of took practice to sort of slip into that.
When you come out of that, when you come home, is that weird?
It was fine. I was lucky enough to then go onto another project very soon after, and I don't know. It was. I felt home was grand, I think, because I just sort of was very excited to come home as well. But also then going on to this next project and working in a different way, I felt a little bit like, in all honesty, I was playing catch up, because we'd had this very focused experience and was sort of prepping the other project sometimes of a weekend, and there were some things I had to learn for that and using my Saturdays to do that. But broadly, I wasn't as focused on it as I would have been if there had been open time beforehand. And so then coming into the back end of a rehearsal period then, and also the story was one in which things are happening.
Was this Munich?
This is a film called Munich.
And it was directed by
Christian Schwocker, who's a German director. And it's the story of the year before the Second World War. Neville Chamberlain and the leaders of Europe were part of brokering a peace deal in which a portion of Czechoslovakia was given to Hitler. And this project is a thriller set in that year, of kind of people trying to broker this peace deal and the compromises that get made on a massive scale to try and hold on to peace, but then by the same token, you know, also not having to let a lot of stuff go as well.
Well, this was a very different production, wasn't it?
And this was very different. And so because of the nature of the piece, the characters so often are catching up with news on the minute. Like, oh, we've had a message from this leader here and this, that, you've got to get this piece of information. And everyone's running and talking quickly all the time. And so in a way, again, we could kind of count on the fact that the circumstance, at least for myself, was sort of facilitated the story, because I was kind of running in and a bit like, okay, okay, these are my lines, and that's the German bit. Okay, right, okay. And so, so we just kind of went with the flow of that it was a new experience and trying to kind of juice that newness and sort of put it into the feelings of the story. But the production in a COVID sense worked very differently in that we could go, there would then, as we were filming, was a lockdown in Germany. And so everything became a lot more sort of locked down. But for a time we could go to restaurants and cafes and things in our downtime. But we would then be tested much more regularly on set. And in some senses, the medical protocols were higher and greater, but the day-to-day looseness was freer. And it
was a bigger cast.
It was a much bigger cast
and bigger crew.
Yeah, it was a sort of larger production in general, and also spans many countries, places within that country, like within those countries. It's a very different story. So, but I think again the slightly fractious nature that came with getting used to working with the COVID restrictions, perhaps again played into creatively the way that the film worked, because there was this sort of adrenaline where sort of almost like when the masks come off, of like you've kind of got this window where everyone can work and then everyone has to kind of go back. So it was a kind of like, it was a bit like a game of American football, there was like a break and go and break and go and break. Where with the Wolf film, there was just a very small core of us who were sort of in it all of the time, so I think maybe that's how it played into it. And and I think also you learn of the things that you learn, how much having forced upon you can really help and aid, and something to kind of hold on to and try and remember for future work. But then you also miss the personal side of things, of not getting to know people as well because you haven't seen their face, really simply. But we all understood it's all for absolutely vital reasons. So, but it's just interesting to kind of observe, how that affects the making of something. Because I think a process of work does really seep into how something comes across the final product. I don't think the two really separate.
And going forward, you're about to enter another film. Has that been a different process again already, or has it been similar to Munich?
No, it's kind of. I guess the difference is that you're limited with physical interaction before you get there. So like the read through was on Zoom and things like that, and everything you sort of you're only in the same room with people when needs must. Which it's funny, I guess it sort of becomes what you're used to. And there are, peaks and troughs to that in terms of it perhaps provides more time on your own to kind of, to do your own homework. But then it also narrows the ability to kind of just collaborate on the fly with people, just to have discussions that aren't organized. There's a lot of magic that comes in that sort of time in between when you're queuing for a coffee, or you're sort of getting your lunch and you go, oh yeah, that scene, I was thinking that, or like someone brings up a news article that they remembered that sort of relates to the project, and that sort of looseness kind of goes. But again, there's a real energy and excitement when people are together, because it is a real thrill and a novelty.
And have you had much chance to watch films? Have you seen things that excited you?
Yeah.
And films that you think, yes, I'm glad cinema is not dead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's been so many films, so many films to. Oh God, I'm just trying to think of sort of to specify. I mean, of course, there's been like all the awards films which came out a few months ago, and also kind of a few again looking into older films as well, like that thing of kind of catching up on films which you sort of said, oh, I must watch that, and I never have. So I'm just trying to think of a couple of them that.
Well, like classic films, or just films that you haven't seen from the last
classic
couple of
films.
years?
Like a friend of mine put me onto films which I'd sort of heard of, and then but actually kind of had no clue of the story. Like I watched Five Easy Pieces the other day with Jack Nicholson, and I thought that was really cool because it was just sort of one person's. There wasn't a huge amount of story to it, you know. It's not an obvious kind of A to B. It's just kind of cycles of behaviour in different places, and I thought Jack Nicholson was great,
phenomenal, yeah.
He's just so brilliant. So there's been a fair bit. I mean, actually watching television, I've just started watching Mayor of Easttown, and the acting in that is just amazing.
I haven't seen it yet.
Everyone in it is just so brilliant. It's really inspiring to kind of watch something. Go, yeah, I can't wait to sort of get back and have a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering about you and other specific things that you'd really like to do. Would you like to? I know you're writing. Would you like to write and direct, or would you like to write and get someone else to direct? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would really love to. I'd really love to. I think, as I say, I mean, like I've been sort of writing for a wee while, but it's this thing, as we was just saying before. I must admit, I'm sort of nervous about I want there to be a final polished piece that I am pleased with, that I can sort of go, there's what I've sort of had a go at, and for that to sort of speak for itself. But by the same token, I think a reticence to, feel okay about talking about something while it's still a learning process is kind of stops you even getting started with stuff. So I'm writing. I had a number of ideas that I'm kind of figuring out and putting time aside to do. And I don't know what form or how and when they sort of come to fruition, and what is fruition sort of thing when they're finished. But it's something that I'm kind of learning more and more about, I want to participate in a kind of in telling, I guess, sort of learning to tell a story from all different ways, of not just kind of facilitating it from an acting point of view, but to try and work out how you can kind of articulate an idea in a narrative. Because I think you've got all these sort of themes or situations which you just want to kind of figure out or put down there. I think, oh, that will look cool. But then actually there's such an art into putting them into a cohesive narrative, or playing with forms as to, like, how to show those things, whether it needs to be a narrative or I don't know. I would love to write and direct one day, but I'm just I'm doing my own homework in the time in between, and that's been a big part of lockdown, actually. But I'm also just trying to kind of keep eyes and ears open when I'm working. I'm getting to try to sort of throw myself into different ways of working as well, and observing the peaks and troughs of something like a situation like lockdown, or how processes of work change due to higher powers, like the way that kind of COVID has changed, and gone, oh, okay, if I ever was to direct, there's some real use in having people isolated together for a long period of time. But then there's also some difficulties with that, and like, how can that go into telling the story, and what story might benefit from that, and what story might suffer from that as well. So just trying to kind of take the bits of learning as they come along. Absolutely.
Are you then optimistic about the future of cinema?
Yeah. I think so. I think I mean, I'm really hopeful. I think you have to be. I think there's so much that over this last wee while, in so many senses, kind of socially, politically, personally, that I think there's been so much which we've all been asked to confront, and and finding different ways to articulate that is so healthy. And be that in kind of conversations that you have with your friends and family, or kind of on a wider level through stories, and what form those stories take and how they're told. I think, there's so much that is to be discussed and to be put out into the world. So I feel very hopeful that there's going to be a ton of stories and amazing perspectives kind of come from this time. And I'm very hopeful that there's still a kind of a want to see them in a cinema, because I do love rooms like this. I think it's really, and again, in the same way, if we talk back to that process of focus, I think there's so much your head is kind of pulled over in so many different directions nowadays, and the ease with which we can get to stories and television and many different things is a wonderful thing. But then the flip side of it is it's really lovely to kind of be isolated into an experience for an hour and a half, and something really healthy to have your focus pulled, and to be kind of given to something for a portion of your day. So, I'm hopeful that the cinema sticks around.
Me too. I think what would be a nice way to end is to think about this is a festival for young filmmakers, and there are people filming us who are part of that new next generation of filmmakers. There are people who've entered their films, and there's so much joy in cinema. What advice would you give to people who are starting out, or if you look back on your life and think, what do you wish you'd known? And
I think, well, firstly, well done for for participating, for kind of getting films in, for watching films, for in whatever way that you are or that you can, having a go. I think that's the biggest thing that anyone can do ever, and that's the biggest thing that I would say, because I think sort of specific advice or encouragement is kind of can narrow things. But I think if you get stuck in whatever means is available and whatever means you want to, only good can come from that. Because even if it will teach you that that's not what you want to do, that's a positive step in a direction. You sort of like pinball your way up to whatever you find is your way of working or expressing yourself. So I think first, well done on participating, and keep doing. And I think to myself is there have been so many times where I've kind of been doing something for another reason, and it's taught me something that is then vital to something down the way, which I just did not plan for, in terms of, even if it's like an audition that, you're really kind of hoping for something, and you train a certain aspect of a skill that you need, and you don't get that role, and it's gutting. And 2 years later, there's another project which is about a same portion in history with a person doing an equivalent thing, and you go, I did 6 weeks of getting ready to do that thing, and now it's okay, yeah, no, and I feel like I get it because of this part, and it's like yes, and it's not saying that everything will be on a sort of 2 year. You just never know when
nothing's wasted.
Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. And I think as well, in the same way that I was slightly reticent to kind of talk about the things which I'm having a first go at, like writing, because there's nothing to legitimize that effort just yet, because I've not got a script that I'm happy to kind of everyone to sort of read, or there isn't a script fully finished, that you kind of sometimes that you kind of get in your own head about cancelling out the effort, where I think you don't wait for others to legitimize what you're doing. If you're doing it and you're doing it in your own time, you're doing it. And that's all. If you kind of measure yourself too much by other people's reception of what your work is, then you'll kind of never get started, because there's only, that you can't, there's so much great work that kind of gets acknowledged at different times, and that acknowledgement being, a mate reading it or people seeing a finished piece, that there were so many steps before that bit of acknowledgement, that if you kind of wait for that, if you kind of go for the final, concentrate on the final piece too soon, you'll never get that kind of thing. You never start. So in a roundabout way, I think just keep doing
Just keep doing
in whatever it is. If it interests you, if it excites you, do it, and see where it goes, and do it for the doing, and see where it falls.
See where it falls. I think that's a lovely place to end. I want to thank everyone for watching, wherever you are, the imaginary people. I hope someone's watching.
Yeah.
I want to thank the lovely people filming us, and to the Barnes Film Festival for inviting us to speak, and the beautiful Olympic Cinema for lending us the very swanky cinema. And most of all, I want to ask you, will you come back next year?
Yes. Yeah,
Can this be an annual tradition?
absolutely. We'll go on the red seats and I'll wear a blue suit.
Okay, let's go on the red seat. Yes, and we'll do it the other way around.
Yeah, perfect.
And but thank you to everyone for joining us at the Barnes Film Festival, and hope to see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.